Hello, everybody. We have still a minute to go before the official start of the webinar, so I will just allow people to still enter. I welcome all the participants who are already here, and we will try to start really on the dot, which is now, so that we have enough time for question and answer and to listen to the presentation today. So I welcome everybody here today to our webinar on decarbonization, skills, and people. I am Flaminia Tacconi. I am a senior lawyer at ClientEarth, and I'm working on decarbonization of the fisheries sector and on subsidies. Just technical information. Today you will be able to listen and speak in French, Spanish, and English, and there will be translation. I now will start with a small introduction, and then I will give the floor to our guests, to our speakers. So I would like to start this webinar with a quote from the book Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So given the actual context of climate and biodiversity crisis and the urgent need to change our whole economy model to a less polluting, less resource intensive, and less energy intensive one, including the fisheries sector, we need to know exactly where we come from and where we want to go. In our last webinar, I expressed what was the vision I had for the energy transition of the fisheries sector, for an energy transition that is not only an environmental transition, but also a transition that is socially and economically just. I would like to recall this vision just for those who didn't attend the last seminar, and also to put the context to this webinar. In the next year, I would like to witness an energy transition of the fisheries sector that progressively leads to a greenhouse gases neutral fisheries using less energy intensive gears and less destructive fishing gears. Decarbonization, in my vision, will go hand in hand with the transition towards low impact fisheries, allowing the ocean and fish to play their role as climate regulators and natural carbon sinks, and to thrive as part of a healthy marine environment and ecosystem. Coastal communities will also thrive thanks to the sustainable activities of their local fishers, but also thanks to the beauty of the marine environment. And they will feel responsible for this beauty. They will protect, honor, and valorize it. Fisheries will be primarily dedicated to fish for human consumptions, and consumers will have learned to eat less but better seasonal fish that has been sustainably fished in EU waters. Maybe it's a tough vision, maybe it is a difficult vision, but we hope that today, through this webinar, we can understand what are the skills that we want to have for these people that care and fish in our waters. I would like also to give a quick recap of the process at EU level that is happening. So there is a decarbonization process that has been started with the publication by the European Commission of the Energy Transition Action Plan in February 2023, so a bit more than a year ago. And then there was a launch of a formal stakeholder dialogue in June 2023. Then we had already 2 workshops linked to decarbonization, one on the 28th of November that was dedicated to the financing of decarbonization, and one at the end of February on innovation and technology. And we are lucky enough that this week, so at the end of this week, on the 19th of April, there will be a dedicated workshop on skills for the transition. So we call on the Commission to develop other thematic workshops in the next month, because this exchange and this dialogue is very important. It is designed, this dialogue is designed to support the Commission in developing a roadmap for decarbonization of the fisheries sector by end of 2024 with targets, and hopefully also clear milestones and deadlines that will be embraced and included in national plans to transition and decarbonize the fisheries sector. So in the same spirit of dialogue and exchange, Bloom Association, ClientEarth, Life, and Oceana have organized this short webinar as active actors of this dialogue. And we are excited today to hear from 3 speakers where we come from and what skills will be needed to lead a successful energy transition in the spirit that I mentioned above. The first speaker is Didier Gasquel, and I will switch to French to introduce him to honor his mother tongue. Didier Gasquel
is a professor of marine ecology at the Agro Institute in France. He's the head of Pôle Halieutique, Sea and Littoral and Higher Education Institute, and is responsible for master degree in fisheries and aquaculture science, and he recently published a book entitled Pêche écologie manifeste pour une pêche durable.
Charles Bren, and I will also introduce him in French, est un ancien marin-pêcheur en Bretagne.
Charles Bren is a former fisherman in Brittany. He now chairs the Pleine Mer Association committed to the transition of professional fishing and is a partner of the company Poiscaille that distributes sustainably fished seafood products by subscription producers to 22,000 subscribers in France.
Salva is also an artisanal fisherman from the Cap de Creus in Spain. He is member of the Low Impact Fishers of Europe. He has been promoting collaboration projects between scientists and artisanal fishers his whole life. He also followed projects related linked to conservation and to the reduction of fishing litter in order to transfer knowledge and take care of the sea. Salva has been holding environmental awareness workshops on marine waste and artisanal fishing. And for the last 6 years, he has been running a clown show dedicated to educating people and children about marine wastes. And he does that in primary school and town halls. So we are very grateful for our 3 speakers. And without waiting, I will give the floor to Didier immediately so that we stay on time. Didier, you will have approximately 10 minutes. I will try to be strict on time, but I know you have a lot to tell us. So I will be maybe a little bit more flexible. You have the floor.
Ok, thank you Flamina. Bonjour à tous, je vais donc m'exprimer en français pour vous présenter
Hello everyone, I will express myself in French to introduce the results of a study carried out in France, and I would like to share a few ideas with you. Let me share my screen. I think you should see it, more or less. There we go, Flaminia, yes, you see? Okay. So, Didier, you should move full screen so that we see the presentation, because here we have something very tiny. So if possible, could you make sure that we see a full screen presentation? There we go, it's much better. So you see a presenter, but not a presentation mode. I think you should be able to toggle the view on the left-hand side. Yes, there, just next, afterwards. A bit further, there we go. Or not? Because that's not presentation mode. Hiding this mode? Well, sorry about that. Could you go to full screen again? So the presentation is on the top of your screen, isn't it? Let me see. You are sharing your screen. You just need to open your PowerPoint. But I have 2 screens and apparently it's not on the right one. So let me try to stop sharing my screen. There we go. Sorry about that. A small technical glitch.
Là, c'est très bien. C'est très bien.
Pardon, oui. Voilà. Pardon pour ce petit
Sorry about that. Anyhow, as I was saying, I will begin by talking about a study we carried out and published in France quite recently. A study on French vessels in the Northeast Atlantic. And I think that our diagnostic is quite applicable to most European fleets. We have evaluated the environmental, economic, and social performances of all fishing fleets in France in this area. Well, now I have lost my PowerPoint anyhow. Here, today, I will focus on today's topic, i.e. CO2 emissions, since we are here to talk about decarbonization. And what's more, I will also focus on the questions of ecological and social transition for the fishing sector in order to advance towards pesco ecology, as we call it. In a nutshell, our methodology, it is based on public data from Europe, from report from STECF, also from the fisheries we have, and other assessments from different working groups from CEM, as well as STECF. And thanks to this data and to the different working groups, we have ID'd different elements. We have worked on overfishing, catch of juveniles, seabed aberrations, sensitive species, namely marine mammals and seabirds. And there is a fifth point, which is important today, and I will start with that one, CO2 emissions. And for each fleet, we have computed several economic and social performance indicators on employment, salaries, added value, profitability, and finally, the subsidies. The fleets we have studied are structured in different ways, and let me switch to English. There we go. So, depending on the type of vessels, because we have the passive lines, nets, and pots, which are used with certain types of vessels. Then we also have the trawlers, demersal and pelagic trawlers. And finally, we have some vessels which are partly used for dredges and which are deemed as being polyvalent. And then we have three sizes of vessels depending on their size, 0 to 12 meters, 12 to 24, and over 24 meters for industrial vessels. For those 12 main types of fleets, we have the amount of boats, obviously, and we can see that we mainly have coastal boats. Coastal passive boats almost represent 47% of French boats. We are talking about small-scale fisheries here, according to EU terminology. And if we are to add pelagic trawlers, demersal trawlers, and dredges, well, we see that these coastal vessels represent some 75% of the fleet. We have many tiny boats, but they only fish 10% of our fish, whereas the semi-industrial and the industrial catch quite a lot of fish. On CO2 emissions, it is quite clear. We have a total emission of almost 700,000 tons of emission, and over 50%, almost 2/3 of these emissions come from demersal trawlers, mainly the semi-industrial and industrial demersal trawlers. So when we analyze the total footprint of the French fleets, well, we have this diagram, which is quite the same for EU. And in red, we have the demersal trawlers. and
de plus
those trawlers
Ces deux
that
secteurs-là
are
représentent
over 12
des émissions, alors
meters.
qu'ils ne
They
représentent
represent 57% of CO2
5%
emissions, and they only represent 2.5% of vessels and 27% of
pour chaque
landings.
kilo de poisson
In a nutshell,
il y a des
for
émissions.
every kilogram of fish we produce, we have a lot of CO2 which is produced. Here, concretely, 3.2 kilogram of equivalent of CO2.
Ne peut pas
When it comes to decarbonization, we do need to bear this in mind, and we need to focus on this matter, and decision makers need to bear this in mind. And we need to focus on the demersal trawlers. I won't dig into details for all the categories, but here again, in red, we see the demersal trawlers. They do represent
une part majoritaire des captures
they do represent a lot of landings of protected species and secondary catches, and over 90% of the footprint on the bottoms of the seas. There is also one key element on sensitive species. In France, and I'm not sure it's the same elsewhere in Europe, but when it comes to mammals and seabirds, we see that mammals and seabirds are mainly captured and threatened on the coastal areas. Here we wanted to focus on the CO2 footprint, and in this graph you see that we have maximal levels and lowest levels, and we see that indeed the semi-industrial demersal trawlers are mainly responsible for CO2, that the others are not as important CO2 wise. And here you have, well, also the footprint on exploitation and the footprint for sensitive species. So this is for the global footprint. And it is interesting to make a comparison in between these data and the tons produced, or even the value produced, or even to compare this with employment created. And here we see that trawlers have a huge impact, at least for CO2. Even when we talk about kilo of fish which is landed, we see that trawlers have a massive impact. So we do fish loads of tons, but to fish these tons of fishes, we emit a lot of CO2. When it comes to emissions vis-à-vis value created, we see that there too we have a lot of an impact with pelagic trawler. We see that the impact is not as important, and then when it comes to employment, well, same story, quite an impact, but not as much. I try to put it in a nutshell because time is limited. Now, a few socio-economic indicators. First, to tell you that when it comes to employment that is created, well, there are a few differences wage-wise, but there is a huge difference when we have a look at the tonnage coming from our seas. And we see that for passive jobs, loads of employments are created, but there industrial trawlers generate fewer employment, and pelagic trawlers generate even fewer jobs. Second indicator on profitability. Here, on the x-axis, you see the ratio between subventions related to
la détaxe dont bénéficie le gasoil. Donc le ratio
oil, which is provided cheaper, and then the gross margin. And for these massive fleets of pelagic industrial trawlers and other trawlers, well, these fleets are only profitable thanks to subventions because of the advantages they get for oil, because their gross margins are below these subventions. And when we analyze the added value, well, there too, we see that in the end, the added value created is extremely weak for these industrial trawlers. Final socio-economic indicator, if we compare these subsidies to the jobs created, we see there are massive support schemes for trawlers, and that very few jobs are supported for small-scale fisheries. And when we compare this to the plants, well, mainly we provide support for the big tonnages. In a nutshell, grants and support is provided to those who have massive ecological footprints, and they lead to few extra jobs and not that much added value. As a consequence, subventions should maybe be reorientated. We see that these fleets have a low performance for the environment and for social questions and employment questions. Those semi-industrial and industrial trawlers have poor performances. This is key. And I think that decarbonization of this industry won't be possible. No transition will be possible for this industry if we do not reorganize the fading out of trawling. I'm not talking about something we should do from one day to the next, but step after step, we should get rid of trawling. Talking about steps, what are the next steps? We are trying to imagine different case scenarios, and we've seen that trawlers are very important when it comes to the amount of fish that is landed. So obviously we cannot get rid from all the trawlers from one day to the next without preparing a future without these trawlers. As a consequence, we need to invent a future where we continue fishing, providing the market with captures coming from other sources and not from trawlers. If we want to proceed with such a transition, well, then we need to organize things progressively. First, we need to build new. We need to stop building new trawlers. We need to replace old trawlers by modern fleet, evolved fleet. Wherever it is possible, we should also try to redistribute fishing quotas, which are today mainly provided to trawlers, and rather opt for other types of fishing vessels, which, for example, use long lines or other systems. And today we have seen that transitions are possible. I would just like to mention one thing about lobsters. Lobsters are fished today in France and in most EU countries exclusively thanks to trawlers, and other countries, for example, Iceland, have decided to work with boxes because we know it is possible to fish such animals differently. Didier, just a word. Try to finish ASAP because time is limited. Yes, final slide. We need to create fishing areas to show that we can fish differently. We should reinvent long-line fishing and fishing with boxes, and we should also provide economic support to the new stakeholders with subsidies in order to favor job creation and creation of added value. final slide, obviously, there are competences we need, but I think that there are competences we can develop and redevelop with fishers who are worried about about an ecosystemic management of fisheries. And finally, I think that there are new skills to develop in order, well, to get back to ancestral fishing practices and all those practices we used to have or those we have in Iceland. And finally, if you want to scan the QR code for the report, that's it for me. Thank you, Didier. We will share the links on our website as well. Don't worry, there will be a file with a recording of this event as well. Now, without further ado, let me give the floor to Charles.
Bonjour à toutes et tous.
Hello, everyone.
Flaminia vous l'a dit, moi je suis
Flaminia has told it to you.
président de l'association Pleine Mer.
I'm chair of the Pleine Mer Association, which works on transition for fisheries in France and Europe. Transition in the widest sense of the term on economy, society, and environment. I am also member of Poiscaille. We are an ecological business working and aiming at providing goods from the seas to consumers as directly as possible. Let me now share my story. Some 15 years ago, I used to go to the European Commission and European Parliament because I was a member of WWF and working on fisheries. And at one point, I decided to become a fisherman myself in order to see what's happening on the ground and to try to make lines move from the ground. In 2011, I've had to go back to school to become a captain. So I stayed at school in Brittany, and every night after class, I'd go fishing with my canoe, and I would simply use my rod. I didn't know how to do that, and I realized that actually it was possible, well, to make a living out of a practice which did not emit any CO2. And then I met local authorities for maritime affairs, and they told me it was impossible to become a professional fisherman doing what I used to do. Then I started my fishing business and started creating an association as well to represent small vessels, La Plateforme Petite Pêche. And what's more, I worked on another project in France because there was a call from the National Agency for Energy for tomorrow. And so I worked with engineers, with mechanics in order to find how to create a vessel that would not have a massive footprint. And so we worked on creating a vessel made out of linen and with an electric engine. So we were part of this project for two years' time. It was extremely serious. And in the end, well, the French authorities rejected our project. And the millions of euro served to creating another type of vessel which would allow, well, to reduce consumption of some 15% of oil consumption. So we were quite disappointed by this decision, but this goes. This is quite logical, bearing in mind what Didier has explained. And two other things now. We have been working with sailors in order to see how sails can be used and reused in order to fish in the Gulf of Gascogne. And this is completely possible in the region of southern Brittany. And today we work on another project, Schavik, also with sails, and we try to use soft fishing skills, again using wind power. There are constraints, huge constraints. We are facing one challenge after the other. I introduced three big requests. I shared requests from people from the industry who truly want to bet on decarbonization. And as Didier has said, we do want to favor fishing methods that are less energy consuming because they will generate most jobs and have a lesser ecological footprint. But here I just talked about French projects, but I guess there are such projects in every member state of the EU. And today, the innovations projects for new vessels should be earmarked for such techniques, so that new initiatives can bloom. In France, for example, we are thinking about how divers could fish clams, and so we should think about that, because instead of using boats, sometimes we could use scuba divers who are powered by fins. Finally, for France, but also for other countries, we are facing some constraints related to red tape, technical red tape. Today, it is completely impossible to register a sailing ship as a fishing ship in France. And so everyone should put pressure on member states so that we could have exemptions and so that initiatives could go at sea, and so that we would not just hear words, but so that we could take action. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Charles. Non, pas du tout long. On a récupéré tout le temps de Didier, donc c'est parfait.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Charles. And I will ask to the participant to ask their questions in the Q&A button. Otherwise, I have to follow the chat and the Q&A, and it's a bit complicated. So just please be mindful of this.
Lucy will upload your presentation and we will start.
Hello, good morning to you all. Thank you for the opportunity of being here. So I can transmit the concerns of an artisanal fisherman of third generation in my family. Thank you for all these presentations that have been very thorough and technical and illustrative. And I would like, as Charles did, I would like to tell you about my experience and all the struggle I had to maintain with the economic area in Europe and also with fishermen organizations, so we could put forward a project that until now we haven't had the opportunity to get authorized. This project, please, next slide. Next slide, please.
Lucy, Proxima.
Yes. So, thank you. I developed about 7 years ago a study to see the conditions of the fleets that we have in artisanal fishery in Catalonia. I did a census to see how many vessels we had in my region, Catalonia, and the age of these vessels. And we can see that the average age of these vessels were 31 years, and the length, it was 13 meters. Most vessels are made of wood. They were old vessels. So I asked the European Fund, the FEM, so we could develop an electrical boat. I did a study where I visited all the fishermen and women from all the fishermen organizations present in Catalonia to see what their needs were and to be able to design these vessels and which were the best options. I did a data gathering process and we designed, next slide please, a type of vessel. Please, next slide as well. Perfect. Next slide. So we designed a boat with European funds, an electrical geared boat, so we could decarbonize the fleet that we had at the moment in Catalonia to make it more attractive in terms of CO2 emissions, but also for young people, so we could have a generational exchange, new generations coming into the profession, so we could have different vessels and we could work in a digital way in our vessels, so we could go back every day after working to charge our vessels. And this study was financed by some European funds. But when I asked the funds to be able to change my current vessel for this electrical vessel, they told me it wasn't possible because there was a norm in the economic European Union in which we couldn't build a boat with this kind of subsidies. Obviously, I was very, very angry about this and very surprised because I spent a lot of time meeting with different peoples, and then I went to the European Union, try to speak with Viceva, with Giacomo. I tried to struggle together with them. And now there are new legislations, and we see that this norm is still applicable. So we cannot get funding to build a new boat. Therefore, we find ourselves in a process where we want to decarbonize ourselves, but there are no subsidies given to artisanal fisheries to be able to do so. This creates a lot of challenges in our sector, and also because we want to transmit to new generations a new way of doing fishing. I've been working on this for many years, as I said before, and also Flaminia's proposal in this webinar was related to this, in terms of talking about all the skills that we needed to have as fishermen and fisherwomen to be able to go forward in the future. Didier and Charles spoke about this. They have been in the European Union. They are also been fishermen. I personally come from a family of fishermen, and I would like to reflect upon these skills that we need. Fishermen, we cannot be always attentive to an administration that is completely obsolete, that is against us, that is not doing things the way they should. Some of the things they do, for me, are arbitrary. They are not even spending on electrical vessels. We are not even able to do a testing, a piloting of these kind of vessels to be able to see if the sector can become more attractive. Therefore, we need people to listen to us, technical people who can pay attention to artisanal fisheries. As we said before, the demersal trawlers are very detrimental in our countries, not only in France, but also in my country. We see that most of our fishermen's organizations in Spain are in the hands of the demersal trawlers associations. So this is a great issue. We have no voice, no vote in these kind of organizations. And yes, we have little to say if we don't phase out the demersal trawling. Artisanal fisheries are going to see their end. Therefore, we need change. We need technicians to support us in a technical way so we can access to all these new technologies, and for people to understand that artisanal fisheries are the only ones that are going to survive. For instance, my grandfather, he had his wines, he had his artisanal fishery set up, and also different artisanal skills involved. And I believe this is the future for us. We cannot afford to have this industrialized fishery, because if we continue this way, there won't be enough fish for supermarkets, for people, etc. And we also have a great concern. Sometimes it's hard to differentiate fisheries. If I am a fisherman with a small boat, a 10 meters length boat, I need to have sustainability tags in my boat. So as for consumers to understand that the fish that comes to his hands or her hands is sustainable, because this is a way by which people can protect the environment. And we need to differentiate us from other fisheries that are producing or catching their fish in a detrimental way for the environment. Why cannot we have this differentiation in terms of tagging in the supermarket, and the consumer does not have a clue if this fish comes from a traditional or artisanal fishery or from an industrialized one? We need to observe the sea in a different way, through different lenses. Therefore, we need to have this approach in mind. We need to be able to show that we are the survivors of this industry. We see that in the way we are working, we cannot continue. Also, we see that young people don't know how to cook fish, they don't know how to eat fish, and no one is doing anything to prevent this from happening. I believe if we continue in this way in the future, people won't eat fish because it's going to become very expensive for the consumer. And all these, I guess, is very related to all these skills we were talking about before. Therefore, I wanted us to reflect upon the fact that the EU is not helping us enough. They are not helping us to make the transition from a traditional boat to an electrical boat. Maybe we could do some pilots in Catalonia, in the Mediterranean Sea, in Brittany. I guess each vessel, depending on the sea where it's operating, needs to be designed in a different way. So we need to take all this into account. Therefore, I believe all these things are vital for decarbonization. Next slide, please. Well, this is the boat I was talking to you about before. This is a catamaran that can be also hydrogen powered, not only electrically powered. So we see that there is no fossil fuel engine, and all the service gear is geared electrically. This vessel is quite attractive for young people, especially young people that respect the environment and want to work in silence in the sea. This vessel is designed to be able to practice ecotourism or fishing tourism, as we call it. It can transport 7 people with their services, etc. I'm afraid that you only have 2 minutes left. You only have the same time as Didier. Next slide, please. Well, this is what I was talking about before, the fact that FEMPA funds don't subsidize this kind of new construction of vessels. And these are the skills that I was talking about before. We need to understand how to use digital tools. We will need a lot of electrical technical support to perform this, and also sustainability tags in our products so people can differentiate us. So this is a summary in a nutshell of what I wanted to talk about. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muchas gracias a ti, Salva. Un placer. Dear attendees of the webinar, so now is your turn to ask questions to our panelists. I see that we have one question from Hendrik. which is, I think, primarily directed to Didier, but I think it can be answered by others. I don't know if, Hendrik, you want, I invite you to open your camera and speak. I'm not sure you're allowed to open the camera. That's Lucy who's managing that. But I like to have this interaction. So if it's possible, go ahead. Otherwise, I will read the question that Hendrik asked. Go ahead, Hendrik.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you, Hendrik. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, my question is actually, how do you see fishermen who are trawling still now making the transition towards more sustainable fishing methods?
Didier, I'll give you the floor, and then if Charles and Salva, you want to intervene, feel free. You can. Yeah.
Oui, évidemment, c'est une question très importante. Il y a pas de...
So this is obviously a very important question, and there is no magic wand. I think that we need a mix. We need a policy for support and for subventions. I think that young fishermen are starting nowadays with more sustainable practices, and some of them truly want to aim at such practices. But more often than not, they do need support. I think that we should European funds for fishing, the FIAM, to accompany those fishers who want to shift towards such practices. But we need to create some kind of mindset where people want to try it out. There are different fishing areas in France or elsewhere that are closed to trawlers, where case studies are possible and where new practices can be tried out with long lines, with boxes, and with many other things. And I think that those pilot projects should be accompanied with subsidies. And I think that we have 10 or 20 years ahead of us to proceed with this transition, and we can start from today onwards. In the meantime, we wait for new trawlers.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Didier.
One element, because I know Hendrik, and I hope Hendrik you don't mind. Hendrik is one of these young fishers, and hopefully one of these young fishers that want to this bright future for the for fisheries, and I'm quite sure. So he's a very young fisher. Maybe, I don't know, Charles or Salva, you want to add something? Otherwise, we have other questions. Yeah, Charles, go.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. I won't repeat what Didier has said, but there is indeed this question of support, which is key, but psychological support is also key, because next to the logic related to what we need and this transition we need, we do know that shipbuilders will have to change, and many practices will have to change. We've had many crises in Brittany, and this has led to huge disasters. Public money was lost, jobs were lost, companies had to close. And as a consequence, psychological support is necessary, because some people are fishermen from one generation to the next. As a consequence, next to the transition and this financial support we need psychological support, especially in regions where some ways of doing are deeply anchored in family. I am happy to see Salva, Hendrik, and to see that we are not the only ones to try out new stuff, to indeed try to have a transition on the ground. But today, states impose rules, and as a consequence, we should try work on policy. We should be role models. We should show to youngsters we can do better with a bit more comfort, with less pollution, with a great products. And if we are applauded and admired for our efforts, well, then there will be a transition, and then decision makers will make the legal framework
I don't know
improve as
if,
well.
Hendrik, you unmuted yourself. I don't know if you want to add a comment on that. Otherwise, I would switch and ask maybe Mercedes Salas to ask the question if you want orally. But Hendrik, go ahead. We hear a lot of noise, but if you want to add something, please feel free to do so.
I think mostly sustainable business models are important, and I think we should first think about that. So I did it the other way around. I started to make the transition towards less CO2 and keep on going with the transition. And now I find out that we first need sustainable business models. So I hope that we in the future first think about that. And yes, you are right about the psychology support part of it, but that is in place because we didn't think about the sustainable business models, and that's why the psychology issues come in. I hope you heard what I said.
Yes, fantastically. Thank you so much, Hendrik, for intervening and for this great exchange. I think Salva wants to step in. Salva, please feel free.
Yes. I would like to add the fact that in our case, it has been very important to do this knowledge exchange with fishermen, to work in projects where we try to give voice to the sea, because the sea does not have voice, but scientists and fishermen who live, who breathe the sea, we can tell you what is happening, and we can transfer the knowledge of the fishermen to the scientists and the scientists' knowledge to the fishermen. And I believe this transfer of knowledge is what makes us wake up to new realities. And afterwards, we can develop business models. But I believe that we need to collaborate more with scientists. In our case, it has been very useful to be able to develop a more sustainable fishery in our context. We need to take into account this transfer of knowledge between experts.
Muchas gracias, Salva, por tu intervención. Now, if Mercedes, you want to come live and ask your question, we will try to answer. Otherwise, I can read the answer out. Go ahead, Mercedes. Mercedes, you have the floor. You can talk. Okay, it doesn't work. I think I'm going to read the answer. So Mercedes is asking, could you tell us more about what is going on next Friday about the fishing decarbonization proposal? So I am not in the Commission. I think there are some colleagues from the Commission. They might take the floor later. There is nothing concrete that is going to happen on the proposal for the roadmap yet, but it's a concrete workshop where there will be an exchange on what are the skills for the people who will be engaged in this decarbonization. So it's part of what we are talking today is what kind of skilled fishers and people who accompany the sector in the decarbonization that will be needed to lead a just transition, energy transition. Yes, that would be the reply from my side. I don't know if Anna from the Commission, you want to take the floor and be more precise on the workshop. I don't have here at hand the link to the workshop, but maybe we can share that as well on our website or on the chat. Yes. Yeah, Mercedes has trouble with the micro. I don't see other questions. So maybe I will take this opportunity to give my final words, because then we stay on time and we don't steal any time from anyone. So I would like to inform you that from that technical Anna cannot open the micro. Can we allow Anna to open the micro, because she could give the information that that Mercedes was asking for?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, Anna, go ahead.
Okay, good. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for opening the mic. I was trying to see how to do it and I was not finding it. Yes, regarding, so first of all, thank you for this workshop and for all the discussions, and for the workshop that we will be holding on Friday. It is within this set of workshops that we have been organizing within the Energy Transition Partnership that we launched last year in June, and also in the process of the actions implemented, announced in the communication of the energy transition in fisheries and aquaculture. The goal is to of this partnership is to have this this place and this platform where all different actors and different stakeholders from all the areas that somehow are connected to fisheries and aquaculture and are interested, have a genuine interest in advancing the energy transition in the sector, can come together and discuss and avoid the discussions that sometimes exist within only the small groups. And from that point of view, really profit from the discussions. At the same time, this will provide us input as well from the Commission side of the stakeholders' views regarding the energy transition, regarding the obstacles, regarding the solutions that are also being considered in the industry, and will serve as well for reflection within our services to prepare together with the inputs that we are going to get from these workshops and from all the workshops that we will organize and meetings that will be organized within the Energy Transition Partnership for the production of a roadmap for the future. Also follow up on the communication and setting also the direction for the future on energy transition in fisheries and aquaculture. So basically, the idea is to have a discussion, an in-depth discussion with different stakeholders, this time round focusing on skills. We already had in November one focusing on finance. We had one in February focusing on innovation and technology, and this time round we will focus on skills. So this is it. I'm not sure that I think the registration is now closed because we are very close to the date and we have already many people subscribed online. Maybe there are still some places in person, but I'm afraid online it's already closed because it's already there's already many people attending online, and then it gets more difficult to manage all the discussions online as well. So this is it. Thank you, Flaminia.
Thank you very much, Anna, for intervening. We have another question from Cyril Goldberg. I don't know if Cyril, you want to come live or I can ask the question. There is no obligation. You can answer in the chat. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, fantastic. Go ahead, Cyril.
Yeah, it was just a quick question to know if anything was being done on how were we to use the money that's used today for the DTAX differently, it could actually fund a substantial part of the transition and potentially become something like a payment for ecosystem services to encourage new fishers to switch to different gear, or yeah, just to know if anything about that is going on, because I've never read anything about it, and I feel like it would be a very interesting topic. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Cyrielle. I'm not sure, maybe Didier has some information.
Oui, un rapide commentaire. Je n'ai pas le
Yes,
chiffre,
quickly,
là, mais
Flaminia. I don't have the figure, but for the exemption, it's huge amounts we are talking about, but we need to be careful. I'm not asking for the complete deleting of this tax, because most of the fishery company will be bankrupt, so you will kill the ill person right away. So it's not the solution. I'm more in favor of a different solution and the use of the Article 17 of the FCP, where you can use the virtuous method of fisheries in order to foster, and it's a incentive policy, so you will use less oil, you will need less taxes, and you will have money to invest into the transition. But today, maybe it's sad, but fishery is dependent of this. During years and years, we were financing oil, and now we are in a tricky situation because we cannot finance it anymore. Thank you very much. Charles, do you want to add something?
Close now this event. The question and answer session is closed. I would like just to have a couple of words of conclusion, maybe one or two points that each speaker said. Cyrielle, maybe just one last thing. We have 2 reports on our website where we have tried to assess at least how much money has come from the fuel taxation. So this, if you go on the website decarbonisenow.eu, you will find them, but you can get in touch with me and I can send it to you directly. So I think Didier in overall invite us to assess the performance of all fleets in the EU, as he did for the French fleet, and to transition away from low performance fleet in terms of low performance understood as environmental, economic and social performance. I think that what appears, at least for the French fleet, but probably for the EU, is that trawler, we need to move away from trawler gradually. And this will allow us to transition towards a PESC ecology that will ensure that EU fishery is truly sustainable. From Charles, I retain 3 recommendations. And I switched to French because he spoke in French, so it's difficult to translate them there on the spot.
So to foster a fishery method that consume less energy and that are more ecological, and it's touching on the point of Didier, and invest in innovation for small-scale fisheries, such as sailing boats, instead of financing trawlers studies, and also to soften the norms for professional fleets in order to foster transition and to support the fishermen to gain the necessary skills.
Fishers are better supported in developing digital skills that can help them to be more efficient in their work. And he also calls for a bigger connection between scientists and fishers so that fishers understand their role and really enter into the role and honor the role as eyes of the sea. But what comes out, especially from Charles and Salva, is that we need an adjustment of the administrative and regulatory framework so that basically we can go towards this innovative path of and this transition. And I think that there is a call on the Commission to organize another webinar on administrative changes that need to happen. And I think it would be a good team. So now I come to an end. I thank you all for joining this webinar. It was really a fruitful discussion and exchanges. I would like to give a big thank you to Dave Walsh, who is supporting the communication side of things at ClientEarth, and Lucy Goodall for all the technical support from the events team. And of course, a big thank you to the team of interpreters who ensured that everybody could understand everyone. We also would like to remind that we have this dedicated website that I'm talking about, which is www.decarbonizenow.eu, where you can find a lot of reports, information on decarbonization, as well as the registration of this webinar and the past webinars. And we all look forward to the upcoming workshop of the Commission on the 19th of April. And I wish you a wonderful spring day. Thank you very much for participating. Bye-bye, everybody.